Hi, everyone. My name is Lynette Davis with LynetteDavis.com, and I'm super excited to have you here for the 2017 Be the Change series. Oh my gosh, I can't believe we are at that phase already, but here we are. So I am super excited because I have an amazing guest. I have been following this young lady for a while over on Twitter, following her Sigma Fighters hashtag and movement. And I'm super delighted because she has agreed to come on so that I can share her with you so that you can learn how to be the change with her. So without further ado, everyone, welcome Sarah Fader. Hi, Sarah. How are you?
Hanging in, just living life, trying to be a person. And I'm so grateful. Thank you so much for having me.
Awesome. And I'm so glad that you are able to come on. So, Sarah, can you tell me a little bit more, well, share with us a little bit more about Stigma Fighters and what you do?
Sure. Sigma Fighters is a nonprofit organization, and we feature real stories from people living with mental illness. It began as a blog series, and it formed into a nonprofit when I met my business partner, Allie Burke. And the way that it actually started was that I was tired of hiding the fact that I lived with panic disorder. Now, my diagnosis has changed. I found out that I actually am bipolar type 1, but at the time, that was my working diagnosis. And actually, just as a side note, I have a little bit of an issue with people with diagnoses according to the DSM-5, because it's good to kind of know what your symptoms are and like have a working diagnosis, but at the same time, we are human beings. And so it doesn't actually matter what your diagnosis is as long as you have a good practitioner who is able to get you on a good treatment plan. So I just wanted to say that as a side note. But yeah, so I wrote my story about living with panic disorder for the Huffington Post because I finally got to a point where I was reading a lot of different blogs because at the time I was blogging about parenting, and I noticed that people were actually at the point where they were being more candid about, taking medication, let's say for anxiety or depression. And I felt like the internet was finally becoming a safe place to kind of disclose these issues. So I wrote that post, and then I started getting feedback from people all over the world. I'll never forget this email from this woman in South America. And she was like, I live with anxiety. Thank you so much for sharing your story. And I'm looking for a place where I can share mine. Do you know of anything? So I started looking for a centralized location to share people's stories living with mental illness. I couldn't find anything. And so that's when I began Stigma Fighters. And I reached out to people in the community of blogging that I was friendly with and that I knew were open about living with mental health issues. And I said, hey, do you want to write for this blog that I started? And people were really awesome. Some of them, were like, oh, I don't have time, if it's unpaid, I don't have time and all that stuff. And I totally understood, but a lot of people were really cool, and they wrote for me, and that was really wonderful. And it grew and grew. And then I met Allie, and she lives with paranoid schizophrenia, and she's an amazing person. So we both write columns for Psychology Today, and she actually writes one of the only columns on schizophrenia, which is a highly stigmatized mental illness. And she works in corporate America. She's a best-selling author. She's an incredible person. We have an inside joke between us that my anxiety loves her paranoia. And so, together we formed this blog series into a bigger thing. It is a nonprofit organization, and we have published 3 anthologies of the stories from Stigma Fighters, and they are available in Barnes & Noble. I did a reading on the Upper West Side of Manhattan in New York City from one of the anthologies. We've done readings of the essays at New York University, NYU, where that's my alma mater. And my goal with Stigma Fighters is to make peer support groups, or almost like mental health fraternities or sororities in colleges across the country. So that's kind of the long-winded but important story about stigma fighters.
Awesome. I love it. I love it. You gave us where it came from, what's going on, and what your plans are for the future, which is perfect. Because what this series is about is how people can be the change. So, and you kind of gave us a little bit of leeway into that. So, with everything that you're doing and sticking with the theme here, what does be the change? You know, when you started Stigma Fighters, were you kind of thinking, I'm going to be the change here because nobody else is doing this? You know, what was going on? What does it mean to you?
I wanted to, well, one of the motivations is that I wanted to seek out other people like myself because I felt alone in my head. And so that was the first motivation, is I wanted to kind of find people like me, right? And then what became a larger goal once I got this community rolling is that I wanted to change the way that society viewed mental health issues. And so that is what Be the Change means to me, is that people that have mental health issues, and I actually, vacillate between saying mental health issues and mental illness, because mental health, and a good friend of mine, his name is Aaron Smith. He wrote for Stigma Fighters, and he has a great blog called culturalsavage.com. He has bipolar type 2, but he said something on a podcast that I really liked, which is that mental health is what we strive for and mental illness is what we manage. And I think that was a really good quote, and I always stick to that. So yeah, I think I wanted to change societal perception on what it means to have mental illness. Now that is particularly relevant, I think, to Allie, because as I mentioned before, schizophrenia is highly stigmatized. And so what we want to show with that is that you can have schizophrenia and you can be a totally normal, functional member of society. You think of people that have schizophrenia as like the homeless dude near the subway, and that's not everyone. And then the other thing that I think, a lot of mental illnesses or mental health issues have stigma associated with them. Like, for example, I started a viral hashtag, which is now a book, called "This is What Anxiety Feels Like." And that exploded because I think people with anxiety were really wanting to talk about what it really feels like to be anxious. And a lot of stigma with anxiety is that people view us as dramatic or exaggerating, or you can just calm down. Why are you so obsessive and anxious? And it's not something that you can't just relax, right? I've had loved ones in my life that literally tell me, chill out, relax. And that's not actually possible sometimes, because your brain is like, the neurotransmitters are firing at a rapid rate. It's like somebody like pointing a Nerf gun at you and like firing foam bullets, and then someone telling you just relax. Like, that's not actually possible. And if it is, please tell me how to do that, because I want to know. And so so it's like, and then with the hashtag, I was reached out to by a reporter at the New York Times, and that was really gratifying, because I really, the main goal, and coming back to Be the Change, is that being in the New York Times just made my platform bigger. And it showed me that his article was actually about the age of anxiety. And so it showed me that we were paying attention to these things, these mental health issues, and that the fact that the New York Times was interested in that means that as a society, we're evolving and we're looking at mental illness in a different way. So that's how I view Be the Change, is that let's look at this from a different perspective, and let's try to change the way that people view human beings that have mental health issues.
Awesome. I love it. I love it. And you know what? I do remember that hashtag. Now, I was following you before. I believe I was following you before I saw that hashtag, but I definitely did join in on that hashtag when it was going, because it was such an important conversation to be had.
Yeah, definitely. I couldn't agree more.
Awesome. And you know what? Speaking of kind of joining in on that conversation, why should, I don't want to say should, I don't like to, there's
So
a,
as my therapist says, stop shoulding all over yourself.
yeah. I was just saying the same thing. Like, don't should yourself today.
Yeah, no, exactly. And that's like a part of CBT, is that should makes people feel guilty, right? Because then you start thinking, oh, well, I'm not doing this particular thing and there's something wrong with that.
Yeah, exactly. Look, now they're getting some great wisdom tips over here already.
Yeah.
So where I was going with that was, I wanted to know, why would someone possibly care about a movement such as Stigma Flyers? Why would they might perhaps maybe join in? This is what anxiety hashtag feels like. Hashtag. What would it help besides them just kind of joining something to be a part of it? What do you think is a big piece of knowing that you're not alone?
Well, people have different motivations for joining in and being involved in Stigma Fighters. Some people want to be heard having mental illness is really difficult. And so a lot of it is being heard, because when you invite people to share their story or participate in the anxiety movement, for example, many of those people have been told, I don't want to hear about this. And so I think a lot of it is about inviting people to speak on something that they've been silenced about from their family, from maybe their friends, or they feel like they were hiding. It's very much kind of analogous to like somebody who is gay and is having difficulty coming out of the closet, right? So for whatever reason. And so I feel like that's part of it, is being heard. And then some of the people who join in are caretakers. So maybe their son or daughter has severe schizophrenia or something, or bipolar disorder or something like that, where the person needs a level of support that is a high level of support. So there's different levels of functionality when it comes to mental illness, just like any disability, right? And again, I hesitate to call mental illness a disability. I think that that's a personal choice. There are days when it's really difficult for me to, function or do things that I would like to do, but don't feel like I can. And, I do push myself sometimes because I know that my brain is lying to me, but there are days that I just can't do it. And I have to accept that. And so I think that, having a balance with that is good. But yeah, so I mean, I think there are a variety of reasons that people join in on this conversation, and it depends on what standpoint they're coming from.
Good. Also, I think that because some people, they might feel hesitant to join something, especially if they feel as though they don't directly relate to it. Like, they might go, well, I don't have mental illness, or I don't have a mental health disorder. So, what does this have to do with me?
Yeah, but see, that's the thing, is people think that, right? And there's a couple of things going on there. They might not think that they have something. For example, people self-medicate with drugs and alcohol, and they just think that they're having fun. But really, they actually have a mental illness, and they are covering it up. Like maybe they have anxiety, and they drink alcohol to go to sleep because their brain doesn't stop, right? Or maybe it is that they are overworking because they're depressed. But they're like, oh, I just like to work a lot, So sometimes there's that. There's like hidden mental health issues that people are repressing, right? So they say, I don't have these things. Or people experience trauma and they repress it and they say, I don't have any PTSD, but they do. And then another thing is, even if you legitimately don't have mental illness, someone who does. There is somebody that you have met whether it's your friend, your relative, someone on the subway, your coworker, you know somebody that has mental illness, because 1 in 4 people in America do.
Exactly. Exactly. Awesome. Thank you for giving us that information. Of course, my tribe knows where I stand on that, but I definitely wanted to hear from you.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, oh, and by the way, that statistic is from the National Alliance of Mental Illness. That's NAMI.
Yes. Awesome. Awesome. And I'll definitely put a link to NAMI with this interview as well as one of the resources mentioned. So, oh my gosh, I only have so much time and I'm already winding down. So I'm like, no. So
it goes so fast.
It really does. It really does. Especially when you are having a conversation about things that you're so passionate about and that you love to talk about.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
So, let me ask you this, because the funny thing is I was actually just on the phone yesterday with a colleague who's also a business owner, and we happen to be talking about this topic as well. Business owners and organizations such as yours, how can we combine our superpowers and create real impact in the world? Because I know you were talking about how you're trying to expand and create kind of like these fraternities and sororities of mental health on campuses. So in that case, it would be school programs, combining with nonprofit. So in other facets, aspects, how would we be able to work together to really take this movement and really do what you're trying to do, which is fight stigma?
I mean, I think it really depends on the context of the person that wants to help or collaborate and what skills they have. So with any collaboration or any attempt to change things, right, you have to take stock of what your skill set is. So I guess my skill set is I am good at public speaking. Another skill that I have is making things go viral. Those are things that I honestly am good at. I'm very tenacious. I don't give up. So let's say that Stigma Fighters wanted to collaborate with Target. Here's a random example of that. So Target has a huge platform and many people shop at Target. So maybe it's a matter of using the combined social media efforts and Target saying, we support people with mental health issues, and if you shop at our store, then we donate $10 to NAMI if you make a $100 purchase, or we donate $10 to Stigma Fighters, right? So it's just about what you have access to and what you're good at. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. And that's actually a really great example of what I believe they call it cause marketing.
Yeah, so at Target, if you're listening, I shop at your store all the time, and you should totally collaborate with us.
I second that. Target, like the opportunity to get involved with something that is so very important right now. It's been talk of the town lately, to be honest.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I want to address that too, because some of me feels like I am glad. I have a mixed feeling about this, because I feel like it's great that people are talking about these issues. It's very gratifying, because I grew up in the 90s, right? So I spent a lot of time hiding my mental health issues because nobody talked about them. I remember sitting in Barnes & Noble reading Prozac Nation by Elizabeth Wurtzel and being scared that somebody would see me reading it. So that's why I didn't buy it. And because that was the culture and that was a societal norm in the 90s, was don't tell people if you are depressed because they're going to think you're weird. Or, don't tell people if you have anxiety because they're going to think you're strange. So, but that's what I was getting to, is that now the dialogue is more open, which is great, but I kind of don't like that mental illness is like trendy, right? So, I mean, and then people question whether you actually have it, or, you know, the legitimacy of that, of what it is. And so believe me when I tell you that it's not trendy. It's not fun. It's not something that I'm saying because I want to be awesome. Like, it's something that is a reality, right? So if somebody's telling you that they have mental illness or a mental health issue, they're not trying to be like wearing the coolest sneakers. They're saying that there's something that they live with that they're managing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. 100%. So I'm glad you brought that up, actually. That was another conversation I was having with somebody else. Because I feel like, it can end up being kind of like the boy who cried wolf kind of story.
Yep. Yep.
I think I'll leave it there. Where it could be something like that. And then when people really do want help, and somebody's kind of taking it and like, yeah, well, I have depression too, and I'm getting over it. You know, that's when it becomes a problem.
Oh yeah, and also the essential oil people really bother me. I'm like, that's awesome that you like essential oils, and I'm sure they're helpful for anxiety, but they don't cure schizophrenia or bipolar disorder.
Right. Yeah. And I like the oils. Don't get me wrong. They are wonderful and they're soothing. But as with anything, I always say that it's important to talk to a professional, and you combine things, you combine tools. Just like I'm a big...
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly right. I mean, and again, I'm not trying to like knock on somebody's essential oil treatment. I think if it works for you, that's great. I mean, whatever works for you, do that. And I'm not gonna sit here and be like, the only cure is therapy and psychiatric medication, because maybe that doesn't work for you. Maybe something else does. Maybe mindfulness does. Maybe essential oils do work for you. But it's not fair to push or proselytize your treatment plan on someone else.
Right.
It's individual.
Right. It is, because we're unique individuals, and no treatment
works
for everybody else. While there are best practices, there's always exceptions to the rule, and we've always known that.
Yeah. Look, I mean, you know, I have seen people take psych meds for depression, and maybe they're just going through a tough time, and then they don't take them after 6 months or a year because they figured out a therapy that works for them and they don't need the medication anymore. And actually, my psychiatrist is of that opinion. Like, if he can get you off of medication, like, and you know, because again, like, if you experience one episode of depression in your life, it doesn't mean you have clinical depression. It means that you had a depressed time. Most people actually have an episode of depression. But, you know, there are people that continually have them, and it's beneficial to stay on medication. But, you know, that is what I like about my psychiatrist, is that he's not like pushing meds.
Awesome. And it's so funny because I go a little bit into that with some of the things that I've been writing. So, but another conversation for another day. So before we go, could you give us one actionable piece of advice that for somebody who has been listening to this and they're going, I heard her say she can go viral with her movement, and I want to be a part of a movement to recognize mental illness, disorder. I want to be a part of it. I want to join Sarah. Hey, I didn't know about the hashtag, you know. So what's one piece of advice that you would like to give somebody who is ready to jump on board, be an advocate, get started, and they don't know where to begin?
That they want to be a mental health advocate? Is that what you asked me?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
With anything that you do in your life, be genuine. Because if you're trying to be something that you're not, people know. So that is what I learned the most about social media, about living my life, when I was able to accept who I was and what I was good at, and stop fighting my flaws and integrating them into who I was, then I was more successful. So there are days that you're going to fall on your face. There are days you're going to do something that doesn't work. But try things that come to you intuitively. So that's really the best advice that I can give. Be truthful with yourself and be, patient with yourself, but just really be who you are. That's really what it boils down to, is be who you are, because who you are is a beautiful person. And people will see that truth. And also, don't try to emulate somebody else, because there's no point in being it's good to it's good to have people that you admire, and it's good to I also really recommend developing connections and becoming friends with people, both in your day-to-day real life networking and things like that, and also online. I mean, an example is that when I started blogging, just about parenting, the first thing that I did was make friends with other people that were doing the same thing, because I wanted to learn about that industry. I don't even like to say that word, but I mean, I wanted to learn. And if you don't know about something, the best thing to do is learn, because that's how you're going to be successful. So be yourself and be open to making friends and collaborations, because you can't do it by yourself. And really just be truthful.
Love it. Love it. Awesome. Awesome. Sarah, thank you so much for stopping by to give us some awesome wisdom nuggets, so that we can learn to be the change, as just like you are being the change with stigma fighters. I'm getting all kinds of tongue twisted. And let us know where we can find you online.
I am consistently on Twitter. I'm trying to kind of minimize my Twitter. I need to put limits on that, but I do love Twitter. I think it's great for a lot of reasons, networking and stuff like that, and also just getting the word out there about yourself. So I'm on Twitter at the Sarah Fader.
Awesome.
That's the best place to find me, and then also my website, which is sarahfader.com.
Awesome. Awesome. Sarah, again, I thank you so much for coming on and sharing with us. I was definitely fangirling when you said yes. I was like, yay!
Yeah, I looked and I saw what you've been doing, and I love Dior Vargas. She was wonderful. So that made me be like, oh, this is very cool. And I love that you're doing this. I think it's really fantastic, and keep up the good work.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I truly appreciate that. And everyone, until the next time, you change. Take care, everybody.